Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. What we have here today in this video is another one of my primary hybrids in my collection. And this one is a cross between Fall Violacea and Zebrina. Last year it bloomed for the very first time under my care. I've owned this orchid since it was a seedling. So it's been a while, but this year, second blooming, and it's doing much better. So let's go back in time for a little bit. This is right after its first bloom, and I was taking photos just for my own documentation purposes to see how fast it was growing roots and 2 new leaves. But now fast forward to beginning of February 2019, this was the time that it was already growing a new flower spike, the second spike. And the second spike actually was growing really fast, much faster than the first old flower spike. In fact, you'll see later in this video, the original first flower spike never really grew any longer except for that very tiny little section at the end to eventually give me another bloom this year. So the first 2 flowers are the flowers on the new spike, which is also much longer. And this orchid, it took it, almost a month from beginning of April to end of April to go from buds to first bloom. So that 1 month, I mean, to me, I know it's gonna take some time, but I think for new orchid hobbyists, it's a excruciating time. And what I have gotten in terms of questions from new subscribers or new orchid hobbyists, they tend to have a lot of troubles with bud blast problems. And based on my experience and my research, and also based on my conversation with some of my orchid friends, there seems to be a couple common factors that may influence bud blast. Number one really is, well, first of all, there are 2 categories of reasons: environmental, but also orchid health. So environmental reason, obviously, there is temperature, there is humidity, but then there is also how often and how badly you move a given orchid to disturb it. And then the health reasons would obviously include root rot, stem rot, or crown rot, or even any pest infestation. All of these could or any combination of the reasons mentioned above can potentially increase the likelihood of having bud blast for an orchid. So that's that. And I've actually done a couple videos talking about bud blast reasons and how to prevent them. But this video, we're not going to focus on that. This video is really about how I provide care to this orchid. And this orchid also happens to be one of the orchids in my collection that have really crazy roots, and specifically aerial roots. So I thought I would use some time in this video to share with you my opinions on how these crazy aerial roots come about in my environment. Because this is not the only one. I've had, I think, about 5 or 6. And their common denominator or a shared common reason is they all were located pretty close, in relatively close proximity to my humidifier in my environment. In my old environment, I should say, because I have moved into a new house. I bought a house and I've moved into a new environment. But in my old apartment, it was a lot smaller, so the humidifier was enough to provide really good humidity when I need it. And the reason I say when I need it is because I don't always keep my humidifier on, and it really depends on what I see on my humidity meter. If it's between 50 and 70%, I generally don't want to have my humidifier on, but if it falls below 50%, that's when I would turn it on. But then I have subscribers from Asia telling me, well, in Asia, in the tropical area of Asia, we have humidity 70% all year round. And we have, obviously very high temperature because it's in the tropical area. But he seems not to have, he has some area roots, but then roots problem, whatnot. But this goes into a little bit more about, okay, so you have high humidity, high temperature, then you really need to provide good ventilation. Because otherwise, when you have high humidity, high temperature, and low airflow, low ventilation, you are looking at serious root rot problems, or even stem rot or crown rot if you water orchids in a different way, in a maybe you spray down your orchids. That's how you water your orchids. Anyway, so that's that. And for this orchid, I don't always turn my humidifier on because I do not want my entire home to be always humid. Imagine because we don't live in a greenhouse, and I don't want my house to be a greenhouse. Otherwise, your leather products or your clothes, things can potentially mold or, have any kind of, long-term damage. And sometimes, for me, I don't even know if our health could be impacted by such high humidity that's not natural as part of the environment. So anyway, so those are some of the things that, in my opinion, should take into consideration when you are trying to increase humidity so that you can, in turn, hopefully get better aerial roots growth for your orchids. Personally, I love seeing orchid with crazy aerial roots because I love seeing roots. And also, this is a good situation to have unless you're really trying to conserve space, especially horizontal space. But in this case, it's also vertical space because the roots have grown so long, well beyond the bottom of the cup. But let's say your orchids has rotted all its roots inside the media, then the aerial roots are really the quote-unquote reserve that you could use, that you could tap into to potentially continue to have this orchid alive, keep this orchid alive. So if let's say that the orchid has rotted all its roots inside the media, then you have to take it out, obviously, do whatever you can, trim off the dead tissues, but then the aerial roots would then become the roots that you repot into the media so that this orchid can properly hydrate itself. So having a lot of aerial roots, other than the looking good factor, the crazy root porn factor, it's actually a good situation to have when you have serious root rot issue inside the container. But I don't think it should be a goal, one of the top priority goals for any orchid hobbyist to have crazy aerial roots. I think overall plant health really is the top priority, because after all, you want your plant to be healthy to be able to bloom for you. Because I think the ultimate goal is to have blooms. Obviously, also, the process is also what gives, at least for me, some enjoyment in terms of, growing orchids as a hobby. But you shouldn't be striving for crazy aerial roots just to have crazy aerial roots. I think overall plant health should take priority. Now, having said that, like I told you earlier, humidifier and proximity to it seems to be the key common theme or common reason for my orchids with crazy aerial roots. And for the ones that are farther away from the humidifier, they grow some aerial roots, but it's just not as, I guess, vigorous. So that's my observation on these orchids and how aerial roots come about in my old grow space. In my new grow space, right now the sunroom is much bigger, and gosh, and there is a vent. It's a central air vent that goes into it. So it's a little hard to keep the humidity constant and higher and constant. So I'm still playing around with the ratio just to see if, if it falls below 50%, how low can I go to still allow orchids to grow as they like, but then also have enough moisture or enough humidity to go about their regular business. So I'm still trying to figure out how the new environment will impact the overall growth patterns for them this going forward, not just this year, because obviously I'm going to hopefully live in this house for a few years before I move again, because moving is always very taxing, very troublesome, and sometimes it's emotional and physical, I guess, burden, and it's quite draining. So hopefully I don't have to do that again soon. But that's beside the point. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!